Hi everyone, it's Evangeline here at etrailer, and today we're going to be taking a look at our CURT bike rack for 2 electric bikes right here on our 2015 Toyota 4Runner. So the best thing about this bike rack is its weight capacity. It has a 130-pound weight capacity, which is 65 pounds per bike. So if you have your extra heavy electric bikes and you need that extra heavy weight capacity that some of your other bike racks do not have, this is what you would go with. So we're going to take a look at some of the different features, some of the different pros and cons of this bike rack, just to make sure that it's the right fit for you, your bicycles, and your 4Runner. So the first feature we're going to take a look at is the tilt-away feature. Of course, if you really needed to access whatever was in your trunk, you could just easily lower the rear window. But if you need to fully open your hatch, you would need to tilt your bike rack away. So to do so, we have this big lever over here. You're going to want to pull that lever. So there's a little button on that lever. Let's get that out and then turn it, and this tilts your bike rack. So just let that drop. It has a stop at the end, and with that tilted away, we now get to fully open our hatch. So we saw plenty of clearance there between our hatch, our handlebars, and our pedals, allowing us to get into our trunk, grab whatever we need. So if we need to grab our bags, our helmets, our waters, we can do so quickly without having to take the bikes off. And when we got what we got, we just lift this back up and it snaps into place. So I do like how that handle was very easy to access, especially with if you had 2 bikes mounted compared to other levers that are inside the bike rack. This was nice and easy to use. Now, let's talk about some of the other features of this bike rack, especially the weight capacity. This has a 130-pound weight capacity. It can carry your extra heavy electric bikes. But as you can see here, we are not carrying an extra heavy electric bike. We are carrying a carbon fiber frame bike, which is okay because we have a front wheel mount. So looking at the way our bike is strapped down, we have a rear wheel strap holding that back, and we have a front wheel mount holding the front. So we have a very nice secure fit here. I like pretty much any bike rack that has a front wheel mount just because of how convenient it is and how much it makes it easier for me to load and unload my bikes. With a carbon fiber frame here, I don't have to worry about warping or scratching my frame, which a frame mount bike rack could possibly do. If you have alternate frame bikes, let's say you have a heavy step-through bike, you have a women's bike or a children's bike, having it secured by the front wheel means you don't have to get a frame adapter bar. So here we have our rear wheel strap, and this is where we start taking our bike off. So you press this lever, lift up on the strap, and then once it's released, you just leave it over here to the side. Notice how you can swing that downwards so it doesn't get caught up in your spokes. Then you go forward towards your front of the bike. Make sure to hold on to your frame as you press this button, and then this will release your front wheel. So that goes up, then you push that out, and from there you can lift your bike up and you're ready to go for a bike ride. So here we have a tray system. So you can slide your bikes back and forth to accommodate your different wheelbases and make sure that they don't interfere with each other. I know when you have 2 bikes on there, you have to make sure your pedals, your handlebars, your seats don't all collide. This helps a lot with that. Now, when you have your bike in place, this is going to be your rear wheel strap. So this accommodates your different tire widths. Notice how we have different grooves in the trays. So whether you have your really teeny tiny tires or your wider fat bike tires, the maximum tire width you can carry is up to 4 inches. Here in the front, we have an extra large and steep cradle. So this is a little different from our other bike racks we have here at etrailer. I kind of like the design. It can be very steep though for your larger bikes, so you may have to hold on to them quickly so they don't roll off. But once you have everything in place, this creates that nice solid base for your bikes to secure it. Here we have our front wheel mount. This ratchets down to secure that front wheel. We have our little grooves on the inside you saw we had a smaller tire in there, and even your wider tires would be fine. This is also where you would secure your cable lock. So the design here for the button is interesting. It's kind of on the flimsier side, but it does ratchet down quickly. So it does make it easier to support or tighten down on your front wheel. If you may have noticed, this is actually a longer bike rack. We have a lot of clearance between our hitch pin hole and our mast, so it adds a fair amount of length to the back of our Forerunner. So we're going to take some measurements to see exactly how much. I'm going to measure from our bumper here to the end of the bike rack right over here, and that sits at 41.5 inches. So this is a long bike rack. Definitely something worth keeping in mind whenever you back into your garage or park into a tight spot. Don't forget that you have a bike rack as well as bikes behind you. Your Forerunner has a lot of ground clearance, especially compared to the other SUVs. So we're going to take some measurements to see exactly how much ground clearance do we have here. Notice how our handle is in the down position, so that's going to be the lowest point. That sits at 22 inches. Compare that to where the tray is, and that's at 25 inches of ground clearance. So comparing those measurements over by the Shank, we have a ground clearance of 18 inches. So ground clearance is important. Whenever you go up those steep inclines like your driveways and hills, you'll want to have enough ground clearance. You have plenty of ground clearance with the Forerunner, so this measurement is actually more important with how high do you want to lift your bikes up to get them onto the trays. But what if you don't want to take your bikes out for a ride, but you still want to keep your bike rack on your vehicle? What you can do is you can fold it up into a more compact or portable position. We have that lever right over here. Pull that lever again, but this time push up. It's now in a folded up position. We'll take some measurements to see the difference this makes. So measuring from the bumper, which we measured at earlier, to the furthest point, it's now at 19 inches. So still a big difference compared to when the bike rack was folded down. Still takes up a fair amount of space behind your Forerunner. Definitely something still worth considering if you are starved for space. Notice how with it folded up like this, our rear window is completely visible. Our taillights sit onto the outside of our bike rack, so those are visible too. Now our backup camera and our license plate are right over here. Those are covered by the bike rack. You'll still be able to see a little bit out of your backup camera though, because there's so much space behind you, but definitely something worth considering. If that's going to be a big issue for you, you can still drive around with the bike rack down. Now this has a 2-inch shank, which fits into your 2-inch hitch receiver, and it doesn't require any tools to tighten it down. You do have this safety clip though that goes in your hitch pin hole, but what's doing most of the work is going to be your anti-rattle knob. So this knob here has a wedge, or acts as a wedge on the inside. So once you have it tightened down, you just rotate this in order to extend that wedge, and that creates an anti-rattle experience. And once you have that in place, you can then lock it, which means you can't access that knob anymore. So I'm going to do a little shake test just to show how the anti-rattle wedge works. Now most of the work is done side to side, so notice how I'm really moving the vehicle at this point. You will have to be careful though with that wedge and just double check to make sure everything is tightened down, because if you don't do this properly, you may encounter some shake in there. So my personal thoughts about this bike rack is, I guess the major thing about it is its weight capacity. When you have those extra heavy electric bikes, you can easily go over 60 pounds with those bikes. Now, the tip is, please, if you can, take your batteries off of your electric bikes, especially when you're on the road, because you don't want that extra road vibration damaging those batteries. That will also make your bike lighter and easier to mount and dismount onto this bike rack. But in those cases still, sometimes this might be your best option for your bike just because it has a 65-pound weight capacity. I would prefer it may be easier to put the bikes up. Since the Forerunner is kind of higher up off the ground, that's also more height you would have to go up with your bike. So definitely something worth considering if you do have a heavy electric bike. But with all that being said, if you're looking for something with a bit more premium features, definitely check out the Kuat NV with the NV access ramp. That will help you ramp your bike up onto the bike rack and make it easier for you, but it doesn't have the same kind of weight capacity that this CURT bike rack has. Hopefully this video helped you out with deciding what is the best fit for you and your bicycles. But right here, right now, this was a look at the CURT bike rack for 2 electric bikes here on our 2015 Toyota 4Runner.